Welcome to the podcast for this episode. I am introducing a new series here, and the guest that I have is a guest that was on the first season of the Traits podcast. His name is Dave Bulloch, and I have him as, I think, episode 18 from the first season. It'll be right around there. Sometimes numbers can change afterwards, but right around episode 18, check out his first season audio interview. Dave is somebody with so much experience. And I'm not going to go over all of his experience right now because it's vast. He has worked in multiple industries, in multiple types of businesses, multiple sizes of business, multiple business with multiple different types of problems. Dave is somebody who has more experience than I would say the vast majority of entrepreneurs have in running a business, solving business problems, and being in various leadership positions. I think he's such a wealth of knowledge. And if you enjoyed the Dwayne series that we did earlier on in this podcast, that we're still doing a little bit, you're going to really enjoy this series. We're going to cover the business life cycle, and we're going to start at A. We're going to start like, what do you need to think right off the bat to make sure that your business is functioning well? We're going to talk about businesses that are growing and things that they need to get right at certain times, businesses that have experienced really high growth, and some of the problems that they run into, things that they need to think about. We're going to be talking about larger businesses who have had a lot of success, things that they need to tweak or think about. And then lastly, we're also going to be talking about succession planning. So I'm excited about this series with you. One thing that Dave said, just off camera, I've just finished recording a session with him, and now I'm doing the intro and outro. Something he said off camera is he said, Mark, do you want to focus on just human capital? And I said, no, Dave, like you go where it's most valuable. He's like, okay, good. Because I wanted to talk about some of the other things too. To me, the most value to the listener or watcher of this podcast series is what's going to be what we need to cover, right? It's what is valuable, not what my agenda is or somebody else's agenda is. So I'm actually going to throw this out to you. And as you go through this episode, as you go through other episodes, I'd encourage you to kind of pick them apart. Are there things that stand out to you of going, you know what, Mark, you missed this opportunity to ask this question, or this is a great topic that I'd like to explore a little bit more. You know what, put in some comments, follow up with us. We are very invested in listening to people who are paying attention, especially consistently, who are subscribers to the podcast. It's something that we want to do, is bring you even more value. So please feel free to do that. Without further ado, I'm gonna allow Dave to speak on his own behalf here. And again, pay attention to the subtleties. Dave's experience speaks a lot of times. Sometimes he says something just small, but I go, oh wow, like there's so much. There's a lot of business experience and wisdom in what he's saying. So enjoy the podcast. I'll see you at the outro here. Welcome to a new series, a new podcast series that we're doing. This is season 2 of our podcast. So last season, it was a lot of audio. This season, we're doing a little bit of video and making sure that you can see people that we are interviewing. Another change with this season is that we're doing some longer format kind of strategy or maybe intentional sessions with people where we've got a number of podcasts with an individual rather than just one. So we started off, you've been paying attention with Dwayne, who started the company Concord Consulting. Dave is somebody that I interviewed last year for season 1, and every business owner is unique in some ways. Entrepreneurs are unique human beings. Having said that, there's some that stand out in a unique way. And Dave is one of those people. Last year when I interviewed him and spoke with him off camera, he's somebody who just has so much experience in so many different realms. And one way I'm going to introduce Dave is actually by referring to another podcast guest we had last year. His name was Carmine from Winnipeg. And he talked about T-shaped leaders and talked about how it's really important to have this breadth of experience in life because that can add so much to a leader. And then once you have that breadth, to go deep down and really become an expert in an area or a few areas, and how that just creates so much more robust leadership in an organization. And I was thinking about that today as I was preparing for this interview with Dave. Dave has such a breadth of experience. Dave, I will probably share some of that in my intro later on when I record it, just because there's so much there. But maybe introduce yourself a little bit, say a bit about what you're up to right now, as well as if somebody needs to get a hold of you, how they can contact you as well.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for the intro, Mark, and thanks again for another awesome season of these podcasts. I've listened to almost all of them. I've encouraged a lot of my clients to listen to almost all of them, and almost every single one of them has said they've learned something from all of the guests you've had, and some fantastic perspectives and folks that you've been interviewing. So it's been really helpful for sure. Yeah, so a bit about me. I had a long career. You're going to spend a bunch of time in the introduction talking about that. Started off, more on the corporate finance side of things, ended up finding a real passion for operations in a lot of different businesses spanning multiple industries. Really dug into operations and how to, help organizations grow efficiently, grow profitably. And obviously, throughout my career, I've moved into leadership positions all the way up to being the top executive or CEO in an organization. And of course, through a lot of trial and error and through wonderful mentors, I've learned a lot of things, and am currently, no longer working full time. I'm working as a fractional leader for multiple clients. Don't want to get into too many details, but I seem to have gotten myself into quite a bit of work lately, and I'm really just looking forward to helping these folks out and contributing to the success of their businesses. So love these chats as always. I know you're going to give me some challenging questions, and I will do my best to answer them and help out the viewers of this podcast.
Before we jump into that, Dave, I'll just back up. You said you were a fractional leader. So I'm guessing most people have an idea of what that entails, but specifically, what are you specializing in right now? How are you helping organizations in a general sense?
Sure, mostly at the leadership level, and currently with relation to succession planning. So, either succession planning and handing off, from one executive to another executive, or succession planning in terms of family businesses, right, where it's moving from one of the family members to a subsequent family member, helping them set up operational practices, processes, giving them a bit of exposure to some things that happen out there in the industry that often, family-based businesses don't see because they've been in one business their entire career, and have perfected that in their marketplace. And then a lot of growth-oriented situations. So organizations that have grown significantly, and are just missing some of the building blocks or some of the expertise that they don't necessarily need on a full-time basis, but they do want access to somebody with the experience. So yeah, fractional to me means basically being available to help these organizations through their various challenges, rely on knowledge and expertise to help guide them and set things up so they can ultimately be more successful in the future than they are today.
So this leads perfectly into our session today. So Dave and I, we've discussed how many sessions are we doing together. We're not sure yet. It'll probably be 4 or 5 or so. But what we're going to do is cover the business life cycle and some really important aspects or times in that life cycle to help business leaders and organizations where they're at. So he's talking about succession planning right now. And I think that leads right into, correct me if I'm wrong, but that leads right into getting it right off the bat. So I'm going to give you, again, really general question. What are some of the most important aspects for a new organization or a new business that wants to grow, wants to eventually exit at some point? What do they need to think about right off the bat? What are some things that they typically miss?
Yeah, it's not to make it a colloquialism, but I'm finding that, entrepreneurs, self-made folks, they understand they've hit a market niche. They're satisfying the needs of their customer. Often they're doing something in a way that nobody else is doing it. They're seeing significant growth, and they're all in on their business, right? Every entrepreneur, every self-made person I've worked with, they are 100% focused on their business, and they know every single thing about the enterprise that they're working in. But what's interesting is, as a result of them being so focused on all of the day-to-day activities in the business, they're not always thinking about what the future holds for them and their enterprise. And so one of the things that, I constantly have conversations with folks about is, where are you taking your business? And so, what I sort of look at this at is begin with the end in mind. And what I mean by end is, at some point, everybody is going to move on from their business, whether you're an employee or an owner, right? For owners, they're going to sell it. They're going to transition it to family members. They're going to retain, their CEO title or retain as an owner, but they're going to bring in a professional leadership team to manage their business on a day-to-day basis so they don't have to. And let's face it, all of these entrepreneurs deserve that, right? They've built massive organizations. They dedicated their lives to it. And at some point, they need to be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor and enjoy retirement or other focuses or whatnot. So the biggest challenge is really, forcing yourself to have the discipline to sit down and say, where am I going to take this thing in terms of revenue, in terms of my future? Do I want to build a legacy enterprise that'll be passed down from generation to generation? That is probably the most important thing that as your business starts to take off, you want to start thinking about and planning for.
Okay, so as I think through this, and it's obvious. I mean, we talk about goals all the time, end in mind all the time. That's something that I think entrepreneurs are I think naturally wired just a little bit to think about long-term planning. Having said that, when it's hectic, things are starting and you're running with 18 hats on your head, doing everything on your own, trying to figure things out right from the beginning, that's the time where it's needed most. My guess, Dave, tell me if I'm wrong, but my guess is that the average entrepreneur thinks about two exits. They want to sell the business or they want to hand it off to their kids or family members in some ways. What are the other exits that are just out there that people aren't thinking about right off the bat that might be best for different organizations?
Yeah, I mean, there's an increasing frequency that I'm noticing of, folks who are not interested in selling their business and don't have a family-based succession plan in mind. So either their kids are off doing other interesting things and they're not necessarily interested in taking over the family business, or they just don't have the next generation to pass it on to, but they're not yet interested in selling the business. And that is seeming to be growing in popularity. So it's one of those things where I still want to own my business. I still want to have some level of involvement in this business that I've created for the last X number of years. But I don't have a clear succession plan in mind. And the alternative to that is bringing in the right type of leadership to take on the day-to-day and allowing you as a leader and an expert to really focus on the things that you can use to add the most value to the business.
All right. So I'm guessing like somebody in their 30s and 40s. Let's talk about younger people right now, younger entrepreneurs, 30s, 40s, starting an organization. Things are hopping along. How does somebody prepare for the most options at succession? Meaning, if somebody doesn't sure what they want in the end, they know it could go different ways. Maybe I want to give it to my kids, but I don't know if they're going to be interested or whatever that is. How do I make sure that I've got the most options available to me? What are the things that I need to do to plan and prepare right now?
Yeah, and I think it is all about human capital and making sure that you have the right people and roles, with the right skills and qualifications and experience in your business as your business grows. So, most entrepreneurs are really good at a handful of things, right? You find you've got folks who are natural born salesmen, or you've got somebody who's a very efficient, forward-thinking operational leader, or someone who's really excellent at the financial aspects of the business. And naturally, we're going to work on the things that we are strongest at, and we're not going to spend a bunch of time on the things that we are not strongest at, or the things that we see as being critical to move the business forward, which, for most entrepreneurs is typically client satisfaction and revenue growth. So the number one thing that they can start to do early on is recognize, those aspects of business that are required in every business that they are not strong at, and start building the team around you that has those strengths. And that's difficult because, often in the beginning of a business, you can't necessarily afford the talent that you want to have. So you struggle through performing some of those tasks, even though it isn't optimal. And also the team that you've built around you that got you to 5 or 10 million is probably not the team at the top level that's going to get you to 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 million. And you need to recognize that at certain points in the business life cycle, you need to bring in people that have experience and knowledge and skills that you are past exhausting your existing team and yourself on trying to achieve.
My mind goes to a couple of different places. We could ask a few different questions here. One place is just selfish. I've learned, or self-focused, I guess. I've learned in my experience that I'm not good at marketing. I don't enjoy it. I don't love it. Great at sales, great at kind of some operational stuff, but finances and marketing are weaknesses for me. What would you say to me, as well as other people, maybe that's strong in finances but weak in operations, or whatever? Maybe pick a few examples. What would you say to these people? How do you get it right off the bat? You just said, like, we don't maybe have enough to bring in top talent for marketing. Should I, and this is the way I've been thinking about it myself, Dave, is I need to find a partner right off the bat that is strong in marketing. If I can find somebody who's hungry, somebody who's willing to do this business with me long term, and that I can trust, I go, if I can find them right off the bat, I'm going to be far more successful. Finances, important, but I can hire other people to do it until I get to a certain place, and then kind of find the right partner or whatever. I've heard a lot of organizations, very successful organizations, at some point hire an accountant as a partner on some level. I've heard that a lot. So maybe clarify that for me a little bit. I know that we'll talk about this in a future session, but off the bat, for somebody like me, what would you recommend?
I would go out to your trusted network and let people know, have an honest assessment of what it is that you are strong and not necessarily so strong at, and go out to your network and understand who out there in your sphere can provide, that insight or those services to you on things like a fractional basis, or even on a consulting basis or on an as needed basis. Because, the sooner you have those conversations, like you've acknowledged, I'm great at sales, I'm not so great at marketing, I'm not so great at finance. But a business requires you to have all of those functions performed regardless of the size of the business. And what's interesting is when people don't say, you know what, I'm not good at this, I have to go find somebody that is good at this, they struggle to learn that new task that is not necessarily within their aptitude, because, entrepreneurs and self-made folks, they can do anything. With enough effort, they can get something achieved, and they feel that exact same way about performing finance functions or performing marketing functions. But every second you're performing those functions, you're taking away from the thing that adds the most value to your business, which is the thing that you're strongest at. So for an early entrepreneur or an early business person, your trusted network is probably the best starting point, because you can reach out to folks that have those conversations about things that people consider to be vulnerabilities. It's tough to talk about things that I'm not very good at. It's easy to talk about the things that I'm pretty good at. So having that trusted network, making sure that you can get introduced to people that can support you in those things, either on a consulting basis or an advisory basis, is a great start. And also, as you pointed out, recognizing that at some point in the future of your business, you're probably going to need to bring that skill in-house, being very aware of at what point that is likely to most occur.
Mm. I was just thinking, as you said, it's difficult to talk about our weaknesses. I'm like, it's very easy for me to acknowledge this. That's after I failed a few times. But one other thing that I've struggled with in the past is finding the right partner. I've had multiple partners in the past, Dave, that they seem to be phenomenal. And when things got hard, relationships started to fall apart, or somebody just wasn't willing to put in effort or take on the same amount of risk I was willing to take on. What would you say, as far as, again, you're going out to your network? I'm guessing that's part of it, but your trusted network, how do you vet somebody near the beginning? And maybe the answer is as simple as golf. I'm not a golfer, but legitimately, how do you vet somebody to make sure that they can handle things when things get tough, or they do have the same kind of wiring you do with risk, willingness to take on risk or mitigate risk in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, that's a complex answer. I have to sort of think about that now. Mm-hmm. So how would I assess? And I can sort of give you some perspective. I think the first roadblock that entrepreneur gets into when bringing someone into their business is, I have to like this person. In order to trust somebody, I have to like them. And often we like people that are like us. And so we fall into this pattern sometimes where we hire a whole bunch of other versions of us in a business. And when you do that too much, you're perpetuating that weakness. You're not necessarily solving that weakness, right? If you and I are working together and we approach solving a problem the exact same way, we may not solve the problem correctly because we lack that perspective. You had a fantastic guest on your podcast last year, Corey Smith, who said something that I'll never forget. He said, you need your business ninja. I don't necessarily want to have beers and hang out on the couch with my business ninja, but I need a business ninja. And that's how I encourage people to look at this. It's not necessarily about whether you like this person or can identify with them on a personal level. I mean, obviously, over time, you need to be able to build that rapport, but you need to be able to respect what they're bringing to the table. And chances are, if you're weak in it, you're probably not going to understand exactly what it is that they bring to their table. The only way to vet that is through experience and also having conversations with others who have worked with those folks. And so, the minute you're thinking about bringing anybody into your business, you definitely need to talk to a bunch of people in their background that they've worked with, bosses, coworkers, customers, vendors. You get as much perspective as you can on that individual because you will get honest feedback from the right people about whether that person is right for you.
I'm into real estate, and so I'm constantly helping people vet tenants. And I've got kind of an internal rule. If I ever notice a red flag, someone's just out. But for yellow flags, I've got kind of a 3 strikes rule of kind of like 1 or 2 yellow flags, depending on the situation, I'm okay with. But if there's a 3rd yellow flag, no matter how harmless that 3rd yellow flag is, I just go, you know what? It's probably best to walk away from this. What would you advise in that same process, maybe with partners or people to work with?
I agree with that, as long as the flags are based on data and not gut. Because you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that make decisions based on gut instinct. And if you really think about gut instinct is based on learned experience, right? And so if you're delving into an area that's kind of unknown to you and you're making decisions based on your gut instinct, you are making decisions based on incomplete data. So I love the idea of, all right, what is a yellow flag and how many of those am I willing to accept before now I'm just not comfortable to make this decision. Obviously, red flags are pretty clear in a lot of circumstances. But you really got to question your yellow flags. Is this a data-driven thing or is it a gut-driven thing based on experience? And do I have the experience to actually make this assessment?
Maybe delve into that, because that's a really, I think, profound statement, whether it's data-driven or gut-driven. What are data-driven yellow flags that you would pay attention to when finding your team early on?
Definitely that referential base, right? Talking to the folks that they've worked with or for or led before, finding the people that will give you that honest feedback about the individual, you're about to bring into your business. I mean, it's absolutely critical that they have actually demonstrated the thing that you need previously, and ideally multiple times. Doesn't have to be in the same industry, doesn't have to be in the same business. But when you say to somebody, listen, I've got this problem, and I know that you've worked with this person in the past, and you might have had the same problem. Are they the person that can solve my problem? Help me solve my problem. What did they do for you? What things do I need to be aware of, et cetera, et cetera? The more you can dig into that, the more data you're collecting to determine if your flags are yellow flags, red flags, or no flags at all, right? And the number one way, particularly entrepreneurs trip themselves up, is they like to work with people that speak their language. And sometimes you need to bring people in that don't speak your language because they bring new skills and perspective to your business that you desperately need.
Yeah, again, finding those trusted advisors around us, even whether it's a partner, an employer, whoever, an advisor that we can trust, even if they're saying exactly what we don't want to hear, right? I think about that a lot. Okay, I'm trying to formulate a question in my head here. Well, so maybe I'll just speak it openly and it'll formulate as we go here, Dave. I'm thinking again back to gut. I'm thinking back to finding the right person in some ways, and I'm wondering, are there mistakes that people might consider a yellow flag. I'll use me as an example. So let's say I'm hiring a partner, or finding a partner, or hiring an employee in a leadership position. And I go, so my gut is telling me that this person is wrong because of this, some problem they've had in the past or whatever. When are there times where I need to reevaluate how I'm looking at that and go, wait a second, if they've had this problem in the past, how did they deal with it? Instead of like, they've just had, like, I think about somebody, I'm thinking about cultural expectations now, but like 50 years ago, if somebody was divorced, that would be a big, almost like a red flag for a lot of people. Now people realize, like, hold on a sec. Like, there are lots of reasons. It's not a black and white issue, right? But what are maybe times where you'd challenge somebody and say, hey, listen, your gut is telling you this. Actually, you probably need to reframe that and look at it from the other side. This might actually be a strength rather than a weakness. What are some of those things that come up for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is about what the business needs, right? You know, if you're considering bringing in a partner, if you're considering bringing in an executive or just somebody to fulfill a certain task, like, you have recognized that your business has this weakness. You've probably also recognized that you don't necessarily have the skill or the experience or even the time to solve that issue. And you always have to reflect back on, what is the business looking for out of this role and out of this individual? And has this individual had experience solving these types of problems successfully in the past? Like, you know, we're all going to make mistakes, right? We make them regularly in business, and everybody does. Every time you make a mistake, you learn from it, right? So somebody having done something in the past, or, you know, someone didn't enjoy working with that person in the past, doesn't mean that they're not successful. It just might have meant that those personalities didn't necessarily connect, right? And I think it's always going back to, what is my purpose here, right? I acknowledge that this person is a little more assertive than I am. They're a little bit more sociable than I am. They take a while to answer a direct question. You know, those are biases, because you're comparing that to yourself and how you would answer that question or give that perspective. But when they give you the answer, is it the right answer? When they are communicating with you, are they communicating in a way that you are confident that they can solve the business problem that's in front of them? Are they talking about their experience and previously done these things? Are they able to connect what they've done in the past to your business need? To me, that is all data. That's not gut driven. That's not biased. If the answer is they've not done it in the past, they're not able to answer the question, even if it takes them a little while to think through it, then that is probably a valid yellow flag.
How much value is there to, whether it's a psychometric assessment or whatever the tool is, how valuable is it to get honest feedback or objective feedback on who we are, so we're looking for those biases?
Yeah, 100% valid, right? You know, psychometrics exist for a reason, and there's a ton of them out there. You know, obviously, certain roles require certain personality traits or certain behavioral traits. For example, you know, you don't want a timid person as a salesperson, because they're not necessarily going to ask for the sale. They're not necessarily going to ask for the close. They're not necessarily going to be as outgoing as you need them to be. They may not be able to think on their feet when challenged with things, you know. So why would you put somebody in that position? You're better off to find somebody who has those behavioral traits that align to the role you're looking for.
Yeah, it's, again, so valuable to get perspective on ourselves before we jump into roles. Okay, another question specifically about partners, or those members of our team that are going to be integral for the business for a period of time, not an entry-level employee necessarily. For those people, how important is it, and I might ask this in a different way, how important is it to find people that align with at least certain goals, or how long they're going to be in the organization? How important are those aspects, or are they even important at all? What are maybe the most important aspects to align with, and what are those that don't align? What comes to mind, again, another metaphor, I guess marriage is on my mind today. I'm thinking about like how many times I heard when I was younger, like, find somebody who believes the same things you do, or has the same cultural background. And to me, I'm like, those actually aren't as important to me as talking about finances with a potential life partner, right? So what maybe do people get wrong in thinking about what people need to align with, and what needs to get right with alignment?
Yeah, I mean, good alignment or great alignment is when you are comfortable being challenged by the folks that you are working with. You've got a perspective, they've got a perspective. If you're willing to put yourself in a room with somebody and have them challenge you on all of the things that you're wanting to do in a respectful way, using data and all of that stuff, if you're capable of doing that, that is great. And then you need to have people on your team that are also capable of providing that kind of challenge and feedback to you. Because what's the point of bringing in somebody with a whole ton of experience and expertise and skills and education only to overrule them every step of the way or not allow them to solve the same problem you would be challenged with in a completely different way? So, being able to nurture that type of culture is critically important if you're going to bring people on your team, right? And you don't want a bunch of people that are exactly like you, because chances are they're just going to do the same things you would do on an ongoing basis. And at some point, that's not sustainable for a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about it and go, one of the questions that I would generally ask, and again, this is a biased question, is what are your long-term goals? Because to me, I'm going, hey, I want this person to be around as long as possible. I'm planning on having my business for another 30 years. Are they going to be only here for 1 year? Are they wanting to do a 50-year timeline? To me, like, goals would be a big issue. How important is that? Like, does it matter if you've got the right person and they could only be around for 18 months or 36 months? Is that really a problem? What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, this notion of yesteryear where somebody starts a job right out of university, works there for 25 or 30 years to retirement, is great. And, if you were continually able to be challenged in your career and business and do it for that long, I think that's fantastic. But that should not be the expectation. Especially at a growing business, you need people to get you from point A to point B, but you don't always need those people to get you from point B to point C, or maybe they don't have the ability. So, this upfront promise, like, hey, we're going to be together forever running this business, that's a commitment that you may not be able to honor going forward, or they might not be able to add the right kind of value to take you from the next level. Kind of goes back to my comment at the beginning. The people that got you to 5 or 10 million, they can still be on the team, but they are not necessarily the most qualified to be your top leadership team to get you from 50 to 100 and beyond, right? You need to bring in new talent, new perspective, and new experience. And sometimes, people aren't able to continue on with the business, and that's okay, right? They've gained something from that experience. They can move on in their career. As far as partners go, obviously, if they're equity partners, that's going to be a bit of a different type of unwinding. But if they are, your partner as an executive team, your partner as a leadership team, I think the honest conversation when the business needs something beyond that person's capabilities is what you owe those folks. But I definitely wouldn't say that it's critical to have someone around for 5 or 10 years. I think it's having that upfront conversation. And you can see often by people's resumes about how long they're going to stay at an organization for. Why not have that conversation at the beginning, right? I think what you would find is having that discussion up front leads to the right kind of conversation about what it is that they want to do with you in your organization and how far they think they can take things with you.
Excellent. I'm going to put this in maybe in the outro a little bit, Dave, but I really like that statement of you don't need somebody, and I'm going to put this in my own words a little bit, but you don't need somebody to take you A to Z. You need to have somebody to take you A to B or A to C. And that's what's best for the business now. And doing that is probably better long-term. And then rehiring, again, saying goodbye to certain people, that's a healthy thing for a business over time to figure that out as it goes is really important. Is there anything else that you would just maybe, what have you noticed from your experience on other maybe mistakes? And if you've got any examples, that would be phenomenal. But mistakes that people have made early on that ended up just kind of hampering them, it was like a break on the business for a really long time because of a decision made early.
The biggest one I'm seeing pretty regularly, and this is over years, not just recently, but it is kind of a common theme, is a business starts and people start awarding titles. It's like, okay, I'm the owner of the business, I'm the entrepreneur, I'm going to be the president and CEO, or the CEO or the president, and I'm going to start working with that title. And I have people working for me that are accountants or salespeople or engineers or whatever it is in my business, to support me in the business growth. And as the business grows, we sort of feel obligated for some reason to not only give people remuneration increases, but also title increases. And, at a certain point in your business, somebody with a vice president title may not have that type of senior leadership experience or skills, because maybe they've only ever worked in your business. But now they've got a vice president title. They're probably expecting to earn a vice president wage. And if they move past your business at some point, they're probably expecting a lateral or increasing move, but perhaps they are not qualified to be a senior executive. And all that does is it increases the reliance on, your business on that person, and vice versa, because it's healthy when somebody decides, I've looked around this business, I've done all I can do for Mark. And I think it's time for me to move on to my next challenge where I can grow my career and get new experience. And they get out there in the marketplace and they realize that in order to do that, they need to take a massive pay cut, or they need to take a role that doesn't have the latitude and flexibility that their current role does. And then they start to look back and say, I better stick where I am. And at that point, that person's productivity kind of starts to flatten or go down, because they realize they're kind of trapped in their organization. And it is interesting because people give out titles because it doesn't necessarily need to come with compensation. It's like, okay, you've done a great job. It's a great experience for you to move on, and we'll give you, move on in the organization. And we will now call you the manager or the director or the vice president of this. But really, the business hasn't changed to require that role. That person's skills haven't developed to allow them to add value to that role. And now you've started to build your senior executive team with people that may not be qualified to be senior executives. And now you've got those roles. And if you need that skill and that person isn't providing that skill to you, you're in this difficult position of, how do I bring the talent I need in if I've already got a vice president, but I need a vice president, as an example. So I say to people, titles are not free, right? You look at somebody's experience and background and skills, and you bring them in the appropriate department or area with the right job description, and you bring them in at the appropriate title, regardless of the size of your business. And if you're looking at adding layers to your organizational structure, or you're looking at adding direct reports to those roles, you always want to reassess that person's fitness to take that next step in their career.
Yeah, I hear you. With somebody who's already called the great grand mucky muck, like you run out of what's next, right? And how do you now, instead of keeping that person in the organization where they're phenomenal and hiring somebody above them that fits in that role, you're now stuck with either firing the person or doing something that's far worse. I was consulting with an organization. This is probably 6 or 7 years ago now, Dave. That it had grown amazingly fast, incredibly fast, and titles were handed out like candy. And one thing, obviously it hurt the organization, but it really hurt the individuals. And you talked about this a little bit. When those individuals moved on from that organization, they all had to take title cuts. And that actually hurt them for the next. I spoke with somebody even just a year ago, and they said, this is still hurting me, Mark, because in the past, I was the VP of this. And now I can't even get a director's role in certain organizations because I'm not fit for it. And it was really unfair to me to give me that VP title. It hampered me for now over or close to a decade, which is insane, right? So it's not fair for those people either. What would you encourage business owners to do early on to motivate, to encourage, or to acknowledge work that people have done? What are some other alternatives?
Yeah, I think there's lots of ways to keep people motivated in their role and give them, increased responsibility without necessarily, moving them up in the, management chain, where it's like, okay, today you're an engineer and you're performing engineer tasks really, really well. And you're an excellent engineer. And I need an engineering manager. And since you're my best engineer, I'm going to make you an engineering manager. And they very quickly realize that they do not have the behavioral traits or the personality traits to be an effective manager. They're really good at being an effective engineer. And that's how they're going to manage all of these other engineers that are working for them, right? And so early on, I think it's recognizing the folks you have in your organization at kind of the grassroots level, and those that you are considering, as leaders or trusted partners, and really paying attention to their strengths and weaknesses and their leadership aptitudes, to know that at this point, I think I've probably maxed this person out in terms of departmental responsibility and title, and looking at other ways to give them challenges, right? If in that engineering example, that person could be a lead of a group of similar engineers if they have that slight personality trait, and they'd probably be happier, because if they're a really good engineer, they're very technically proficient and they can mentor other folks on how to be technically proficient. They don't necessarily need to be their boss. They can be that working lead for those folks. And in a lot of circumstances in growing businesses with my clients, I'm always encouraging them to start with that working lead position. So, you say, you're bringing in somebody that you need that's really good at engineering, but they have to do some oversight of a team. Start them out there. Don't just make them the manager that's no longer doing any engineering. Allow them to do engineering. Make sure they've got the traits and the profile to provide leadership guidance of other technical folks, and start them out with that opportunity. There's no commitment there to be a director or a vice president. It's just a lead of a group of technical professionals. And that exists in almost every discipline in a business. That would be a great way to start to test those types of leadership qualities and give that person the opportunity to expand their skills in the business without giving them the title that they may not want after they have the job for a while.
Yeah, again, putting undue, unfair pressure on that individual who is performing well. You want to reward them, not hurt them, right?
Yeah.
Or do right by them, I guess is what I meant. Are there situations that you've run into where you see somebody who goes, oh, this person is going to be great in X role. We're not quite there yet. We're probably 2 or 3 years away from there, but this person would be fantastic. They're in this other role right now. And so they keep them for those 2 to 3 years. And the person actually kind of wilts away and dies in that time, rather than saying, hey, listen, you are ideal for another role. At another time, please talk to us. I want to keep good relationship with you. Please talk to us. In 2 or 3 years, we might need you, and we'll compensate you well for that. But we're not there yet. We have to say goodbye to you for a period of time. Is that a legitimate thing that organizations need to do, or are there other workarounds there?
Yeah, just like hiring under the level of skill you need for a certain role, you also need to be careful in circumstances like that where you're over hiring, right? The natural starting point for career progression is to, understand at what point in your organization you're going to require certain skills and aptitudes and behavioral traits, and in what positions, and what you're expecting those roles in your business to achieve. And if you have somebody who is in place, who's demonstrated those talents, and that they're capable of doing it, I guess my question back to the leader of that business would be, well, why are you waiting? Like, if you acknowledge that you need this skill 2 years from now, and you have somebody in the business that has all of the things you're looking for, and you've really thought about that, you can develop the right kind of career progression for them to get them there in 2 years anyways. I'm always reluctant to make that long-term commitment, because business circumstances may change, and you may realize, due to something completely outside of your control, that you no longer need that person in that role. So there's nothing wrong with a little bit of a career map or a career plan for those people. I would always be reluctant to commit to a future role, because if it's 2 years down the road, all kinds of things could change in a business in 2 years.
Yeah, everything can change in 2 years. That makes sense to me. Dave, thank you for your time here. I'll cut it a little bit shorter here today, just because your time is so valuable. I so appreciate you coming on here and making time. This has been a long time coming, kind of us planning and thinking through this. So really appreciate you making time for this. I'm excited about the next episodes. We'll talk via email, I'm sure, over the next week or so and plan a little bit more stuff out. But I just want to thank you. I really appreciate your time here.
Yeah, no, it sounds great, and always enjoy these, and hopefully they add value to all of your viewers / listeners now that this is in a visual format. And reach out anytime.
Excellent. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.
What a great interview. Dave is fantastic, isn't he? Like he's not over the top. You don't see him like just exuding energy that's like topples you over. There's this calm, careful perspective that he has that it's been hard fought and won from a lot of experience. I really appreciate Dave. If you're watching this again, I just want to thank you again for doing that. For this episode, I kind of think through as I'm interviewing somebody, what are the things that I really want to leave somebody with if they're paying attention to this later on. We talked off camera about what are some tweaks that we can make to, we talked about A to Z, and what about the B? What about the C? What about the D? Have the end in mind. And we talked about succession planning right from the beginning, exit planning right from the beginning. That was the first kind of key point that I would pull from this as not valuable, as vital to starting a business properly. This is something that hampers a lot of really small businesses where people just don't have the ability or haven't taken the time to sit back and go, what do I want from this? What do I truly want from this? Where am I taking this? And what is enough? When do I say goodbye? When do I say I'm satisfied? I see people run into problems when they run businesses too long. But I also see businesses that run into problems because they never did plan ahead. And because they don't have any action plan for the far future, they don't actually do anything that's working towards that, and they fizzle at certain times. So we talk about kind of how many businesses fail early on. My guess is this is part of it. If people don't take the time to work on the business rather than in the business, which is the curse of entrepreneurs, right? We're always in the business at the beginning, to take steps back and work on the business. Stephen Covey, I think about Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People all the time with this kind of stuff. He has those 4 quadrants where he talks about important versus urgent things, and how he constantly drills home to people. Focus on the important. The urgent will always be there. The urgent will take care of itself, because we will stay up till 3 a.m. to finish those urgent tasks. But the important stuff, taking time to think, is so valuable. Something that we often forget. I forget all the time. I need to remind myself all the time. I'm glad I've got good people in my life to remind me. Number 2 for this was to think about people and make sure that we're okay with finding the right fit at the right time. Dave went into this in a number of different ways, but I think that the overall takeaway is simply find the right fit for the right time. That is okay. It is okay to say goodbye to somebody because they're not a fit after year 1 or 2. They were great for the initial startup. Or to say hello to somebody, maybe even be a touch before I'm personally ready for it, but something that the business is ready for, to take it to the next level, to say, hey, listen, let's hire the right people for the right time. And the third takeaway that we stuck around for a little bit at the end there was talking about titles and how we handed them out a little too frequently, a little too easily at the beginning, which hampers not only the business, but it hampers the person in their career. And this really stands out to me. If you've paid attention to other episodes that I've done here, season 1, season 2, you hear a lot in my questions. I care deeply about people. I care deeply about my staff. I hate firing people. It's the least favorite thing I have in my own business. And yet it's extremely important. And we can do it in ways that release people to be so much better at something else, or we can do it in a way that hurts people. And we can also, in the way we're training people, the way we are setting their expectations, we can also hurt them for future endeavors that they're into. So I was really thinking about that a lot. I'm thinking about it now. I'm thinking about my own business and going, have I done this at all? I don't think I have, but it's always a good reminder to just go, how am I handing out titles? What am I promising people? What am I committing to? Business changes fast. We know this. And as business changes fast, we need to be willing to adapt, but also be willing to be honest with others rather than doing a great sales pitch and getting somebody for a week and then being punished for a month, punishing them and punishing ourselves for a month afterwards. Make sure we get it right at the beginning. We know the best sales, whether it's with an employee or a partner or a customer or a client, is when it's something that truly fits their needs as well. So they're in it for the long term, which is excellent. Or like I said, a period of time, because that's the fit. Hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Again, I said this in the intro, but please leave feedback. Please leave a comment. Please, we get emails actually all the time, people talking about, commenting on different videos that we've got. Please reach out. We read every one of those. We pay attention to what you guys are saying because we want to do a really good job of this. Thank you so much for listening and watching.